Hello everyone, this is Dr. Brian Campbell. I wanted to give you a brief overview and introduction into personality disorders. Now, these personality disorders we're going to be talking about are extremely important in terms of identifying them in your practice, in your counseling, because they're often underlying a lot of problems that people come into counseling with. And unfortunately, many people do not receive adequate training on personality disorders, and they ignore these or don't know how to diagnose them. So it's important for us to be able to diagnose the personality disorders and figure out how we would go about counseling people with these disorders. So you need a good history for personality disorders because often they are long-term and go all the way back into sometimes into childhood. So we need to look at those historical factors and also contemporary factors. And most importantly, we need to look at the irrational beliefs that people with these disorders have bought into, and I will give you a handout on all the irrational beliefs or the toxic beliefs that people with each personality disorder might have, and it's important to look at those because that's what you're going to be addressing in counseling. So you're going to be trying to discover those irrational beliefs, identify them, challenge them, and replace them with the truth, and hopefully you'll be able to do that also biblically with people who at least want to utilize the Christian perspective on that as well, and you can integrate that. Now, I'll be conceptualizing these, utilizing an integrated sort of perspective. I use analogies, and I will be using information regarding the autonomic nervous system, for example, and some other concepts that I think you'll find interesting. So let's start out with a personality disorder called avoidant personality disorder. Now, avoidant personality disorder is characterized by individuals who withdraw from the world. And when I think of avoidant personality disorders, I think of Star Trek and a shield, and putting up a shield. Individuals with avoidant personality disorder are often very sensitive individuals who got hurt and pulled away from the world and put up a shield. And they would like to be on the other side of the shield, but they tend to stay behind the shield and away from other people. They avoid situations that attract attention. They are afraid to be criticized. They don't tolerate unpleasant feelings very well, so they put up this wall, this Star Trek shield, and tend to live behind that. Now let's move on to the dependent personality. The dependent personality disorder, when I think of that, I think of individuals who need someone strong in their boat with them. They need to feel confident by having someone strong. Their conceptions, their false beliefs are I'm needy and weak, I'm helpless, I can't be left on my own, I can't do anything on my own. So these individuals, in my boat analogy here, want a captain, they want someone with them. That can be an institution like the church setting, or it can be actual individuals, but they feel devastated if these relationships end because they feel like they're out in the middle of the ocean on their own. And so they're very submissive usually, and one of the things you have to watch as a therapist is that they'll start to depend on you, and you will become that captain in the boat, and we want them to become independent rather than dependent upon us. You've read in the contemporary literature on codependent. Well, this is sort of the same thing the same name, only it's called dependent personality disorder here. So we want people not to be codependent. We want them to be independent, and we want them to be able to be strong and make decisions for themselves. They feel that if they're not loved, then they're going to be devastated or be unhappy. I'm treating someone right now who just feels totally devastated if one of her family members will pull away from her, even if it's justified. Right now her boys are doing things that are not appropriate, and she just finds it very hard to be able to stand back and look at the story of the prodigal son and let her children have consequences. She just feels like she needs to be with them, needs to save them, and needs to be connected to them in order to be safe. So dependent personality disorder can be one that you can get sort of stuck with, so you have to be careful with that. Obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, you'll very often find in these cases that individuals had very strict parenting, right or wrong, black or white, and what happens is they set up sort of dichotomous thinking, and they feel they have to perform all the time. They feel that they can't slow down. They want to be perfect very often. They're not casual about anything. They need to be driven. They have to be fully responsible for themselves. Flaws or defects in themselves are intolerable. They're extremely into details and performance and right and wrong and doing things exactly right. They can often look very good when they come into counseling, but then you start to tease things out and you realize, no, their lives revolve around a very obsessive compulsive way of dealing with the world, very right or wrong, black or white, and I'm always trying to help people understand that in Christ there's freedom in Christ and not bondage, what some of these people are into in terms of their thinking when they have obsessive compulsive disorders. They're afraid to sort of let down or let go. So usually what I'm doing with them, the theme is loosen up and lighten up when we have obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Now, antisocial personality disorder, this doesn't mean that people are not social. Antisocial means that basically you can conceptualize this as they don't follow society's rules. Very often you might have oppositional defiant disorder in children, especially sometimes in ADHD children, and then they start breaking rules, and then they get categorized as conduct disorder, and finally as adults, when they're in jail or breaking a lot of rules, they get defined as antisocial personality disorders. And these individuals are usually cunning and try to be clever. They look out for themselves. They're hardened by the world. They want to take care of themselves. They don't let people push them around. They're very strong-willed and strong thinking. And they try to get away with whatever they can, to do whatever they can. Many of these individuals, of course, didn't have adequate parenting when they were young. They weren't taught right or wrong, and they didn't receive, quite frankly, enough appropriate punishment to develop a conscience. Many of them have very little sense of conscience. This used to be called sociopathic thinking. And I've treated individuals who had almost no sense of right or wrong. I treated a pedophile one time, and I would talk to him about what he was doing, and he just had no reaction to the fact that he was molesting young boys. And it's quite amazing to see that. So antisocial personality disorder, many of these individuals also are in jail, and sometimes probably the majority are probably antisocial personality in jail. Okay, narcissistic personality disorder. Now this is a really interesting one because it doesn't look so bad on the surface either. People with this disorder think they're very special or unique. That's the characteristic. They've usually been given way too much positive reinforcement when they were young. They actually can get a narcissistic disorder, personality disorder, in two ways. Either you were rewarded too much and praised too much and given too much attention, like sort of Shirley Temple or Zsa Zsa Gabor, or on the other side, you weren't given enough attention or you were hurt and you cover it over with, I'm special, unique, or different. But that's the dominant belief system that actually, and so basically it sort of resembles pride, and what we have to do there is work on humility from a Christian perspective, and help people to feel that they're not all that special, unique, or different, that God loves everyone, etc., etc. So that's an interesting one, difficult to deal with because people with narcissistic personality disorder don't think they have a problem, everyone else has the problem. So very rarely do they even get into counseling unless they're sort of dragged in. I had an interesting guy one time, I gave him the personality test, the Milan, and he came out very narcissistic. He was a very bright guy. And so finally, after showing him the test results and being very forceful with him, he finally conceded and said, yeah, I guess I am narcissistic. He said, but I bet you I'm the best narcissist you've ever had. So I said, yeah, you might be right. Get out of here. No, actually, I work with him. And actually, it was a first entry into working with him because he sort of acknowledged that he did have this particular personality disorder. Now, histrionic is, when I think of histrionic personality disorder, I think of superficiality. I think of like a bug on top of the water without any deep roots. That's my sort of image that I use for that one. These individuals usually try to project a sexual image or an image of attractiveness so that they catch attraction through that. They feel devastated if people ignore them, so they're always trying to be the center of attention. They try to entertain, but usually there's not very many roots there and no deepness in that. And very often these people they sort of overlap with the narcissistic individuals sometimes because they do have that need for attention, and they use their sexuality sometimes to get attention, to get what they want. This is sort of the Zsa Zsa Gabor thing again. Now, schizoid. Now, we talked about avoidant personality disorder, and that's like having the wall up. Well, schizoid's sort of the same, except the avoidant personality wants to be on the other side of that wall, whereas people with schizoid personality disorder, they're loners. They're okay being behind the wall. They've given up on being out there in the world. Often they're night watchmen. They've pulled totally away from the world. They don't really care about what other people think about them. They just want to be free and independent of other people, and relationships are just too difficult to work on. They can't get through that. Intimate relationships they rarely have. In fact, this is the one disorder that in males has one of the characteristics that they have no sexual desire or no erotic needs, and so they've actually sort of shut that off as well as everything else, and they just live lives in isolation, and they're very difficult. It's extreme in terms of their lack of interaction with other people, and very often you're trying to get them engaged back in the world. So that one is a very difficult one to work with. Now let's talk about paranoid personality disorder. This is probably one of the most serious disorders. People with paranoid personality disorder feel they just can't trust other people. Something has happened to them that's broken their trust. They might not have received the type of parenting that gave them a strong feeling of being loved, and maybe their love was based on performance rather than on just being loved for who they are. But paranoid personality disorder, I think of the autonomic nervous system. What happens with these individuals is they feel hurt, and the autonomic nervous system turns on. And the first phase of that is hypervigilance. So individuals with paranoid personality disorder are constantly scanning their world. They're looking for evidence that someone might hurt them, that something might happen. So the first stage of autonomic arousal is hypervigilance. The second phase of that is called magnification. And here, individuals blow things up out of proportion. They see little things and they blow them up out of proportion. They mistrust everyone. They think their spouses are having sexual affairs on them. They think their neighbors are conspiring against them. It's basically very fear-driven. So they magnify things. They selectively look at and attend to things. It's very hard to talk to them without getting involved in their fear. Spouses sometimes try to, comfort them, but very often that's difficult. The individual is reading everything into what they're saying, and is really scared the whole time, and then they confirm their bias. Aha, I knew something was wrong. So this is an extreme disorder. I've had people who, these are very difficult cases to deal with, let's just say that. I had one man one time who was so paranoid about his wife that he sent out her underpants to get DNA testing because he thought she was having an affair, and there was absolutely no basis for it whatsoever. So these are very difficult cases, and very often the individuals with this disorder cannot be assuaged in terms of their fear. It's very, very difficult. They feel that others are out to get them, to manipulate them, etc. So this is a trust issue, and you have to build trust with the individual. And that can often be difficult because they're reading into what you're saying too. So as you're counseling someone with paranoid personality disorder, you have to realize that they're also reading into what you're saying and interpreting whether you're on their side or not, or whether you're going to attack them or not. So it's a very fear-based type of disorder. Now, borderline personality disorder is especially difficult as well. This is usually one that a lot of psychologists say refer them to someone who you don't particularly care for. And it's a little bit of a joke, but it's not a funny joke. But borderline personality disorders are very, very difficult to deal with. I had a woman one time, I gave her the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, and she called me the next day. She didn't like the diagnosis. She felt threatened by it. So she called me and told me that she was going to kill herself. And she was in her car and she was going to kill herself. So I had to deal with that. I had to call the police, etc., etc. And then the phone went off, and then she said, oh, the phone died. So she kept calling me throughout the day, so I had to cancel all of my clients. And throughout the day, she kept calling and saying, oh, the phone's working now, and then it would go off again. And she was really just, punishing me in a sense, jerking me around because I had given her that diagnosis. And so it ended up, she was in her hotel room staging the whole thing, by the way. So individuals with borderline personality disorder, they fear abandonment. That's one of the chief characteristics. They have identity issues. They don't really know who they are. They don't have a good solid sense of who they are. Often their backgrounds are very turbulent. For example, they were military and they moved around. They had no consistent place where they were, and or they had people in their lives who were alcoholics or whatever, and they didn't have any consistency in the way they were treated. They often react in very extreme ways as well. One of the things that's characteristic, I use an analogy here of a lifeguard. They're very intense in their relationship. It's either he loves me or he loves me not. They are afraid of this abandonment, so if you think of them as out in the water and then a lifeguard swims by, when he swims by they grab onto him 100%, and if the person looks away, blinks or whatever, then what they'll tend to do is push away, so that you're either in or you're out. And they push away because they would rather reject before being rejected. So it's a very, very difficult thing to work with individuals with this in terms of how do you confront, when do you confront, how do you deal with that, because they're so extreme in their reactions. Another thing is they're extreme sometimes in spending and sex and various other things, and it's really a very difficult personality disorder to work with. So then they have fear of abandonment, also feeling of emptiness sometimes. They just don't feel like they are anyone, that they don't exist almost, and loneliness and that emptiness. So those are some of the characteristics. And what they do also for drama, to call attention to themselves and to feel that someone will pay attention to them, they often attempt suicide or they hurt themselves, and so that's very difficult to deal with as well, as they do these dramatic things to try to get attention or to get your love, and so that you won't reject them, and they pull you back in through these behaviors. So those are some of the personality disorders. They all have underlying belief systems that we need to look at, that were developed over their lifetime, and we need to help them correct those faulty belief systems. So I hope that you'll take a look at these disorders from the handout I give you, and start to understand how these irrational beliefs can be identified and then changed through appropriate counseling and building of trust, and helping people look at the world from a different perspective, etc., etc. So these are the personality disorders, same as other disorders in terms of what I'm looking at. I'm looking for the irrational belief systems and trying to deal with those and change those and bring them to a knowledge of the truth, and the truth sets them free. God bless.